Senate will resume now. Come back to order. We're now at that point of second readings. Senate File 1003, second reading of the Senate file. Please read it in.
Senate File 1003, COVID-19 discriminatory practices prohibition.
And I will note for the body, we are taking these amendments out of order, starting with the second and then moving to the First Amendment. So once again, taking them out of order for those of you who have them on your desk or on your computer. Reading clerk, please read in the amendment.
Senate File 1003, second reading amendment number 2, corrected copy, page 6, line 8.
Thank you. Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'm going to withdraw this and bring it back on third, depending on the result of the next amendment from Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Senator Cost. Again on Senate File 1003. First reading, second reading, First Amendment to second reading of Senate File 1003. Reading clerk, please read it in.
Senate File 1003, second reading amendment number 1, corrected copy, page 1, line 2.
Senator Perkins, will go to you on the screen. Try again, Senator, we need to hear you there, friend.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm sorry. Did I hear that this is now, this is second reading amendment number 1, or is this number 3?
Number 1.
Okay, thank you. I misheard. So thank you, Mr. President.
And for the record, this is corrected copy.
I don't think I have a corrected copy for at least one posted on the screen for second reading amendment number 1.
We'll just take a moment and let you pull that up, sir.
Well, I've refreshed it and I'm not finding a corrected copy for Senate File 3.
Just to give us just a moment. Clerk's tracking that. Okay, just for just a moment, the Senate's on pause for just a moment. We'll get that for you, Senator. Sounds like you have some first response activity in your area. Okay, the website is updating right now, so those of you who are tracking it and Senator Perkins tracking it in Casper, just a moment while it updates. While we're waiting to have the computer refresh with this amendment, I'll note a couple of different things. You do have paper copies of this on your desk, but also we'll turn some time over to Senator Landon just quickly to insert an announcement here. Senator.
Mr. President, thank you. As we waited for that amendment to come up, I did want to share some information regarding next week. As you know, some of our meetings have had to be postponed and moved. The Transportation and Military Affairs Committee will not meet next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. That meeting was scheduled for Casper. So I would encourage members of that committee to cancel reservations that they might have had next week. And we've moved that meeting to the 29th and 30th of November. That's a Monday and Tuesday. So once again, the Transportation and Military Affairs Committee will meet November 29th and 30th, Monday and Tuesday, later on in November. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Pause for just a moment. Give the Vice President a moment. I just was,
Mr. President, privilege of the floor.
yeah, please, I'm just sitting here thinking that it's a rare opportunity to have paper in front of digital. So that's why we're waiting. So, Mr. Vice President.
So, Mr. President, as I listened to my colleague from Natrona County talking about his tire issue this morning, it reminded me of an incident that I had this summer and the reason that I love Wyoming. So I had been up the Wood River up out of Meeteetse, Wyoming, and had a malfunction with my pickup with a large horse trailer and a number of horses involved with it. I was able to limp it to Powell, Wyoming, where I was able to stable the horses for friends. Through his acquaintance with one of the local businesses, they were able to get my pickup in, but it was going to take a week with, we all know, supply chain problem. So he lent me a spare vehicle. And so after already being a day late, in fact, I had missed a committee meeting because of breaking down up on the Wood River in Meeteetse, being able to leave horses with a friend in Powell, a vehicle that was loaned to get me back. I get to the land of Fremont and I'm pulling into the city of Riverton and it starts spitting and sputtering at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And so I promptly limped the vehicle into a mechanic shop. They had a mechanic that stayed there after 5 o'clock and determined that it was probably a plugged fuel filter. Then because they're an auto repair service, even though the parts store was closed, was able to call the owner of the parts store, get the fuel filter at 6 or 7 o'clock. And mind you, they don't know me. I don't know these people. It's just a business in the town of Riverton. So then having another friend in Riverton that was able to put me up, they had called and asked the mechanic, could he come back in first thing in the morning and install this because they had an issue with, he had a family thing. They had a 4-H thing that they were going to, had to take the kids there, get them weighed for the upcoming county fair. So it took me 3 days to get home. Had I not been in Wyoming, it may have taken me weeks. But at 8 o'clock the next morning, I went down to the mechanics, the auto care repair place. And by 9 o'clock, I was back on the road, and by 11 o'clock that I was home. That, folks, is Wyoming. We all know people in every town that you can call to stay that will bail you out. I recall an instance last year. I was in Teton County, had a tire on Friday afternoon, right? 4th of July weekend, go out, couldn't get to the tire shop in time. So I called a colleague of ours, one of the Democratic representatives from Teton County, put me up for 3 days and give me his pickup and said, go have fun. Folks, that's Wyoming. You can go anywhere in this state. Our businesses will take care of you. Our friends and our colleagues will take care of you. One of the things I love about this state, Mr. President, and I thank my colleague from Natrona County for sharing his experiences, because it reminded me in the last 12 months of all the wonderful things that have happened in my life as a result of living in an outstanding state and the people that we have. So thank you, Senator, for reminding me of the wonderful things that we enjoy here in the state of Wyoming.
Thank you, Senator. All right, we're ready to proceed. Thank you for your patience. We have emailed copies of this amendment, corrected copies to Senator Boner and Senator Perkins. I have those, and copies are being made available to the public, being passed around here in the area of the Senate. In the meantime, you do all have paper copies too as well. So with that, we will proceed. And Senator Perkins, let's go to you on the screen. Once again, this is on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 1003.
Thank you, Mr. President. It just came up. It just was arrived and it just came up. And so this is Mr. President, I would move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 1003, and this is the corrected copy. I was unaware of the corrected copy, and I didn't approve any corrections, so I'm assuming it just must be they must have found a technical correction in it. So we'll proceed here, and I'll try and keep an eye on the corrected copy as well as the one I've marked up. Mr. President, just by way of introduction, we had this discussion yesterday, and what this amendment does is simply takes the public accommodation provisions out of the health department regulations and puts them into Title VI, which is crimes and offenses, which is where the public accommodation statute currently resides. Mr. President, members of the Senate, I think it's only fair to individuals and people in the state of Wyoming that if we're going to make COVID-19 status, vaccination status, you're going to prohibit discrimination based upon a person's COVID-19 vaccination status, whether they've had the vaccination or whether they haven't. We're going to make that at least a somewhat of a protected class for the purposes of public accommodations. Then those individuals subject to those laws, particularly the businesses, the stores, the restaurants, the motels, the other public, the tire shops that we've heard about today, that are public accommodations, that they ought to know that they have one place to go to figure out what their obligation is with respect to public accommodations and whether or not and who against they cannot discriminate. And so what this does, it simply moves that, deletes it, it takes it out of where it was in the bill and puts it back into Title VI, which in earlier versions of the draft original bill, it was indicated and was provided and set forth in Title VI. The easiest way to understand this is probably, Mr. Chairman, if I can go through the amendment, is probably to go to page 2, line 7. And if you go to page 2, line 7, you'll see, well, let me check that against the corrected copy. So you get to page 2, and now it's line 12. If you go to that corrected copy, then you'll see equal enjoyment of public accommodations and facilities and penalties. 69101 is where the public accommodation statute and the prohibitions against discrimination for public accommodations is currently located. And so what this does is simply goes to 69101, and there you see that you're adding or COVID vaccination status along with all the other protected classes for which public accommodations currently may not discriminate, which are race, religion, color, sex, national origin, and now the new language, or COVID-19 vaccination status. Then it simply adds a new section C to 69101. And because you have to understand what COVID-19 status means. And so it takes it out of where it's earlier located in the bill. And we'll see this when we go back and walk through the earlier parts of the amendment. It simply takes those definitions out and places them here so that people will understand and it's clear what a COVID-19 vaccination status means. And so, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, that's what we're doing here. So if you go back to the beginning, I think that will help us understand what is going on in the rest of the amendment. So if we go back to page 1 of the amendment, what we find on lines 1 through 9, we're simply then updating the provisions of the title of the bill and making sure that those now track with the original bill. Then we go down just below that, starting on page, the items on page 2, the items we find on page 2 through, begin on page 2 through 19, which begin on lines 11 through 24 of the amendment. We're simply now removing those references that are now mostly definitional, and we see those in that new subsection C in 69101. Then if you drop down a little bit further, we are deleting some line items on page 4 and reinserting some language because, for example, on line 26 through 31 of the amendment, we're inserting that because that is the provision that is in there. That's what the provision is, and the fine and the potential enjailment that was that is in the bill as written. That was also applicable if you violated some of the other provisions that were in the bill. So we're reinserting that because we had taken out the new section that was in the health code in Title 34, Title 35, and Title 34. We're taking that. We've got to put it back in because there's references to that elsewhere in this bill. So we had to put that language back in, since you can't do it by a reference, since the new section on public accommodations has been removed and inserted back into Title 26. So that's what we're doing there. If we go drop down, what we're doing on the items in line 7 is now we're removing on page 7, we're taking in and we're fixing the headings, and then we're deleting what was in Title 35, the 35.4.114. We're taking that, which is the public accommodation provisions for COVID-19. We're deleting those because we're moving those to Title 6, where I think that they probably belong, and in fairness to all Wyoming employers who will be subject to it, and Wyoming businesses will be subject to it, that they know now they only have one place to look for with respect to the public accommodations. So that's what we're doing all the way through page 8. Then we've kind of gone through on page 2 of the bill, on page 2 of the amendment. You see the lines we've already talked about, where we're inserting now and making this public accommodation. If we're going to do this, Mr. President, members of the Senate, I think it's only fair that we do it straightforward, so it's clear that what we're doing is if we're going to do this, that we're going to have this COVID-19 vaccination. It is now a protected class. Whether we do it this way or even if you defeat this amendment, we are still making COVID vaccination 19 a protected class as far as public accommodations go. So the rest of that, once you drop below line 33 of page 2 of the amendment, the rest of that just then simply goes back and fixes the conforming amendments. Since 35.4.140 has now been deleted, and because we've moved that and the provisions 35.1.4, we're not going to need it anymore because we've inserted those provisions in 69101. We've modified that. So now we're just creating and making those conforming statutes so that we're referring back to where we've moved the statute, the particular statute. So referring back to what the appropriate cross references with that. Mr. Chairman, I think that this highlights the effect of what the bill did and what it's intended to do. Is intended to create COVID-19 status and raise it to the level of a protected class. And so whether you vote for this amendment or whether you don't, in some respects, it doesn't matter, because we are raising, the effect of the bill is to raise COVID-19 status, vaccination status to the level of a protected class. Again, my intent in doing this is not to strengthen or weaken the bill, but to make it more clear exactly what we're doing. And so that when the citizens of Wyoming want to go out and figure out what it is that they're obligated to do when with respect to providing or avoiding discrimination against protected classes in their businesses, they only have one place to go, and that's Title 6, and particularly Chapter 9, and look at 101, 102, and 103, and they'll know where they have to go. And so that's my intent in doing that, is not to change the bill, but just to clear it up so people, one, understand what we do, and two, citizens only have one place to go to understand their obligation under the statute. With that, Mr. President, I'll urge your consideration and your aye vote, and I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Questions or discussion? We are on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 1003. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Perkins, for this good amendment. I actually do think it helps the bill because it clarifies what we're doing and puts a fine point on the subject we're trying to get at. And we're trying to narrow it and have a discussion about discrimination. And as I was looking at our bill and working through the amendments and all the things we're working on here today in this special session, I decided to just look up. I know we all sometimes words become words that we think we know, but it's always good to go back and kind of look up what we're talking about. So the definition of discrimination is the practice of unfairly treating a person or group of people differently from the other group. So that's what we're seeking to avoid here. And the question before us now is, do we want to allow people to be discriminated against in Wyoming based on their vaccination status? Or are we going to hold true to some of the other laws that we have on the books, especially, I mean, I just put the word discrimination in the search in your, where you look up statutes in our state statutes there that we can look up on the WyoLeg. And what else can't you discriminate for? We all know race, religion, color, sex, national origin. You can't discriminate against firearm entities and subsections, or for life insurance. You can't be unfair or discriminate there. You can't discriminate in compensation. You can't discriminate against individuals with disabilities for organ transplants. That was something we did just here recently, a really good piece of legislation. Railroads can't discriminate with who is traveling on them. And we can't discriminate as employers for tobacco use. We get in big trouble if we discriminate against tobacco users or smokers. So that's the question here before us. Are we going to allow discrimination for this new thing that has come into our life called COVID-19 that has touched almost every area of our life? And does that elevate itself to a protected class based on your vaccination status? And I'm trying to seek to level the playing field again to where, regardless of what your medical decision was for your own health care, which is a right preserved in our Constitution for us, that we are not discriminating based on what a person decides about that, because it's an individual decision. No one knows what's happening between you and your doctor or what's going on with your body. That's a personal individual choice. And we need to protect that, in my mind, for our citizens and not see them face ramifications for what they decide based on an individual right to make their own healthcare decisions. And so, you know, I would hate to see us have someone ask, well, could I see your vaccination status to attend a public school? Can I see your vaccination status to go to the opera? I've heard that might be happening in certain places across the state. Would we subjugate people into other rooms, or how would we do that? I just think we're better than all of that, and we can rise above all of this, that we can help heal our communities and make sure that we're still the equality state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussion. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pondering all of that. Appreciate the senator and her thoughts. I've got a ways to go to get arms around this protected status thing, but I do have a question for my good friend from Natrona County with regard to the penalty clauses in the bill. I noticed that we retained on page 4 under a new paragraph F, which I assume pertains to the insurance portion of the bill. We leave a misdemeanor in there, 6 months potential imprisonment, $750 fine. But I'm hoping I'm tracking correctly, Mr. President, that over on page 7, the amendment removes the penalty clause there. So if we could talk for a moment about these penalties and just that would really help me if the sponsor could do that.
Thank you. We're going to wait to collect a few more. We do have the time, so we're going to go back to Chairman Perkins and let him address that question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, I think that I believe that that's exact. I think that my good senator from the eastern side of Natrona County, I think he's tracking this exactly right. What happened before was the penalty provisions for violations of particularly with the insurance that's in the bill, and it was done by reference to the penalty provision in the new statute that was created, 35-4-410 or 140, if I'm still tracking this right, that penalty provision was done by reference. Since we're now deleting the reference to 35-4-140 as far as the penalty phase, we had to leave that in a particular place. Ultimately, the penalty has not changed. I believe that this amendment really does not change the bill as it came to us on second reading. And so it just, like I say, the attempt was to leave the bill intact. Those penalties were already in place in the bill. And so, but since we've moved it, we had to remove any references to the new statute, and then also change cross references to other penalties so that they all tie in. So the penalty has not been changed for any of the violations under the statute. The penalty for violations have always been this criminal charge of a misdemeanor up to 6 months, and then the fine of $750. It still remains that way. The amendment just is taking that and like I say, getting rid of the new section and moving it over to Title VI, and so we're just trying to. It basically leaves the bill as we finished up with it yesterday, other than moving these around and trying to make it a little bit clearer for anybody who comes to read the statutes and understand their obligations and their potential penalties regarding public accommodations. I hope that's responsive, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Case?
Mr. President, thank you very much. I commend the good senator from Natrona County for his work in this area. I think this clarifies the bill and makes it more pointed what we'll be voting on in third reading. So I would ask us to support the or the proposed amendment. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I don't think that this belongs in the list of protected classes. Certainly don't, but that's not what this amendment does. This bill just restructures, the amendment restructures the bill so it's a clear choice when we get there. So I think we should all support it. And then at the appropriate time, let's have the debate on the bill.
Thank you. Now let's go to Senator Anderson.
Mr. President.
We are on the amendment too.
Mr. President, on the amendment, on and for the amendment, I think the amendment does, as a maker of the bill said, improve her bill. It's still awful, but it improves it. I don't agree with the penalties for anybody, and I don't agree with a protected class. But it's an improvement to the bill. I'm sure there'll be other amendments coming to fix some of these things. So I also think we should pass the amendment. Thank you.
Question being called on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 1003. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, it's came to my attention, there is still an amendment that is in process. It has not been distributed on the floor or posted on the internet. For a second reading amendment, I would ask if we could consider a recess until that amendment is distributed on the floor.
Absent objection, we will stand at recess, giving staff time to distribute that amendment. We do not have it up here.
Mr. President.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now that we've disposed of the amendment and I guess we're back on the bill, I do have some information that I think is appropriate to share with the body on the bill as a whole.
Please do, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we had quite a discussion yesterday on insurance. I had stepped out during part of the debate to talk with people from the Department of Insurance about some of the insurance provisions, and I came back and disclosed that. While I was driving home yesterday, I called and had a longer discussion with the folks over at the Department of Insurance about this bill and the discussion we had yesterday, and so I thought it would be appropriate, and I shared this with the senator who was the sponsor of the bill, the prime sponsor of the bill. I shared that with her and a few others a few others that have been involved in that discussion. And generally it is this, just to amplify on the insurance provisions. Mr. Chairman, the concern, if you remember yesterday, the question was asked by the tall senator from Western Natrona County about what's the effect if we did that? How does that affect the plan's qualification under various statutes, federal statutes? And we talked a little bit about, if it takes us out of compliance, then ultimately the state of Wyoming has to write a check for mandated coverages that are out of that we do or we decide as a legislature that are appropriate. And we've done that before. We talked a little bit about the PKU as an example, which is a certain metabolic disease that we talked about, and is one of the 4 mandated coverages by statute. So I talked to her a little bit more about that, and long and short of it, Mr. President and members of the Senate, was what happens, or the risks that we have by doing this, by creating this prohibition against insurers for looking or changing coverages or rating or those types of things, whether based upon your COVID-19 status. She thought more than likely than not we would get a letter of non-compliance. That non-compliance was with the Affordable Care Act. And right now what we have is about, if I remember my conversation with the folks at the Wyoming Department of Insurance, about 98% of the individual policies that are issued and held by Wyomingites are through are covered under the ACA and obtained through the marketplace, the federal marketplace. And if we take those out of compliance, if we remove that from compliance, so no longer complies, then then what happens is the federal subsidy to those individuals who are attained to the federal marketplace goes away. And then you're left with one of two choices. Either those individuals lose their subsidy and either can afford or not afford their insurance will be their choice. If they lose their subsidy, they'll have to come out of their pocket. Or the other, I think, significant obligation, since the state mandated, is the state of Wyoming will write a check to cover the costs of that. And I think the problem we all have now is none of us knows what that number will be. I think it's significant, but ultimately it'll be the responsibility of the state of Wyoming to basically pay the subsidies for the 98% of persons who have individual policies. There are also a number of small group policies that are also obtained through the ACA. We put those at risk. And I just wanted to find those elaborations. I think that my good friend from Western Natrona County, who now chairs education, used to chair the health department, used to chair the Department of Health, or excuse me, the health committee, may have some application on that. But I just wanted to provide that additional information and clarification about what if we get a letter of non-compliance on the insurance provisions that we pass, what that means a little bit deeper, and just help me understand it. And I thought it was interesting, and but I should convey that information to the rest of the body. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairman Perkins. Vice President Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, and I think that given the information that my colleague from Natrona County, good chairman of Appropriations Committee, has brought to light, the amendment that we're waiting on addresses that very issue. And that's why I think it's critical that we wait till we have that out on the floor for people to see how we would intend to address that. So
Thank you.
just for edification, that's what we're waiting for, folks.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my understanding that there might be another amendment in process. It was approved in time, but was held because of the amendment that we just dealt with. And to be honest, it's related to the penalty clause. And I wondered if while we waited on the amendment aforementioned by the Vice President, it might be a good time for us to have a conversation. Yesterday, we got distracted. There were so many issues with the bill. I don't know that we really had an opportunity to talk about the penalty clauses in the bill. Now that we have passed the Chairman of Appropriations amendment, I wonder if there can't be a little bit of conversation in that direction if we're waiting anyway, Mr. President. If we're back on the bill, is that appropriate?
For clarification, Senator Landon, you're just providing information like Chairman Perkins. We're not moving into a debate. This is on an amendment that you may still have coming.
That is informational, the amendment. I wondered if we could not be back on the bill for discussion, or if we're going to save that for third reading, or what your sense is.
Here's what I'd like to do. If you would like to provide just a brief informational piece, this isn't for debate, just background and information. And then if you'd like to bring the amendment, and then that's when we open it up for debate. Does that work for you, Senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll stand down and we'll await the amendments as they come, and any debate can go to third. Thank you.
Okay. Chairman Scott.
Mr. President, while we're at it, on the issue I raised yesterday, we've just got more information on the health insurance consequences of what we're doing here. The experience, Mr. President, when we did the PKU mandate, was that we did have to pick up the cost of the state of that particular mandate. The experience was the cost was not very great, because PKU is a very rare condition. It's an expensive condition when you've got it, but it's very rare. Mr. President, I'm not sure that provides a very good guide for what might happen with this one, where we're talking about a condition where whether you vaccinated or not is both sides are very common. And you potentially could have a much greater cost. And I don't know how to estimate that, but it does sound like a very real risk, given the federal statute in this area. And that's one of the troubles of these things. You do them quickly, you uncover some of the complexity of our modern health and welfare system. And this is one of them.
Thank you. Once again, Chair allowing for some informational background because we do have the discretionary time this morning. So with that, we will await this next amendment and the Senate will stand at ease until the sound of the gavel. Thank you. Thank you for your patience while we put these amendments in order. Proceed now. Continuing now with Senate File 1003, there is an amendment. Reading clerk, read in the amendment.
Senate File 1003, second reading amendment number 3, page 1, line 3.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 1003 and ask for your favorable consideration. Yes, my mic is on. Can you guys hear me okay?
That's a
All
little
right.
better. Thank you.
So fellow senators, this is what we had been talking about, and I thank the good chairman of appropriations for getting more information and explaining it better than I could have. We've been having discussions about that in this bill, and right now, we are in too much of a time crunch to deal with the complexities of dealing with insurance, and no one wants to cause any detrimental unintended consequences. So what this amendment does, it just takes out any references to insurance. It completely removes it. So you would remove on page 2, the existing language that was remaining, page 3, and the rest of page 4, and that takes out all of the insurance provisions. And there are some other conforming amendments throughout that takes care of that. So I would stand for questions or call for the question.
Further discussion or questions? Question being called. This is on second reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 1003. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Second reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 1003 has passed. Continuing now with Senate File 1003. There is an amendment. Reading clerk, please read in the amendment.
Senate File 1003, second reading amendment number 4, page 1, line 4.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment deals with the penalty clause, which has gone through some modifications this morning. So I would ask that this amendment be withdrawn. We may potentially come back on third. Thank you.
Absent objection. Second reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 1003 has been withdrawn. Back on the bill. Senate File 1003, having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Go ahead.
Okay, we'll proceed. Senate File 1019. Second reading of the Senate file. Reading clerk, read in the bill.
Senate File 1019, Wyoming Gaming Commission Scrivener error correction.
There are no amendments. Senate File 1003, having been read two separate times, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. I was too accustomed to saying that. Thank you. Senate File 1019, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Concludes our second readings. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, thank you, folks. I'm gonna, and I think most of you are aware of it. We're at 11:30 and we have no other business for the day. Knowing what it costs us to stay in business, I'm gonna ask that we vote to suspend the rules and do third reading this afternoon I haven't lobbied anybody very hard. It's just vote your conscience on it. To me, it's about money and transparency, and we have adequate time. We've had amendments that were fairly easy this morning. I'm going to ask, should this pass, that we will take a lunch break until 3 o'clock, which gives people time to get amendments ready and staff to go. We can dispose of these last two bills. It will get them out to the public so that they can see them tomorrow and through the weekend and have a chance to see what the Senate's done as they travel over to the other body. Should we not do it, it's fine. I'm not pushing it either direction. We're going to spend another full day of per diem and salary and sit all afternoon today without doing any business of the body, and take a good chunk of tomorrow that everybody travels home that takes a day. And for me, I think it makes sense both monetarily and common sense wise and transparency for us to go ahead and come back this afternoon, accelerate our rules, and go to third reading and allow Friday to gives our staff a breather. We're going to be back next week, gets it done. So that's where I'm at. This motion, I'll make the motion. President will do it. It is a debatable motion, so we can talk about it. We'll vote on it. If the motion passes, we'll be back at 3. Should it not pass, we'll gavel out for the day, and you'll be free to take another 2/3 of a day and do whatever you'd like. So, Mr. President.
Wait, if you would, no, please, I'm noting here that it's not debatable. I believe I heard you say debatable.
It is not debatable.
Correct.
Okay, well, then there won't be debate. So,
Thank you. So I wanted to catch you before you proceed.
perfect.
Proceed.
Suspension of the rules, typically.
That's part of the
debatable
script.
motion.
Yes. We have that in there.
What is?
Pause for one moment, please.
Good. We left this in my rule book.
Mr. President, point of order.
Proceed, Mr. Chairman Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just could we have somebody check something? Just on something that the majority floor leader said. Once we're in session, doesn't per diem and salary accrue regardless of whether we're here or not during the course of the session? And so I just want to make sure that we have that information right. Maybe I remember wrong from my days on management council.
And Mr. President, that's what I was going to say if we had debate.
Excuse me, there we go. Because it's not debatable, I would, as a chair, like to have that clarified before we go into it, because this is pertinent information to your vote. And we'll just pause for a moment and Mr. Vice Chairman
Yeah,
or Mr. Vice President.
Mr. President, along those lines, and I understand the salary issue, but there's also the per diem issue that if we're not in Cheyenne, is that also?
So we'll just pause
So
for a
there's really
moment.
two issues here. We may get a salary while we're in session, but if you're not here and you sign the log as not being here, are we still eligible for the per diem? And I'm not sure on that question. So it's really a two-part question.
Mr. President,
So it's, You need to request privilege of the floor because the motion has not been made yet. So proceed. Senator Boner, I'm assuming you want to ask for privilege of the floor.
Yes, Mr. President, may I have privilege of the floor?
Thank you. Good choice. Go ahead.
To contribute a little bit to the discussion, I've been emailing with staff about the possibility of not taking any pay for this special session. And that is something that the staff is working on. You can expect that at some point. So there will be an opportunity using one means or another, ladies and gentlemen, to forgo pay, depending on your personal choices, I guess, for the special session. I assume that could be a partial, foregoing of pay if we're not in Cheyenne. So that is something that's in the works that I've been discussing with staff. And so there's that opportunity outside of the regular rules that we have for pay and per diem.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go back to the majority floor leader. Do you have an answer for those questions?
I do not. If I was Nair, I stand corrected. I think we should wait till we find out, both per diem and otherwise. But there is one other third layer, if we're going to be asking about it, is does our staff acquire another day of salary? We've got special staff here, and maybe Chief Clerk can answer that, but do they get paid whether we're in or not? Because once again, it's not just us. It costs money to keep the machine running. So I'd like to
We'll
have
pause for just a moment. We can have staff, Ian, approach the chair for a moment. Granted.
Thank you. And one other consideration is obviously we cannot unilaterally adjourn independent from the House. So the possibility of accelerating or changing things is a challenge there. I just wanted to make sure that was
Point of order.
considered as well.
Thank you.
Question. Mr. Chairman, actually, we can. We can go out up to 3 days. Excuse me.
I'm looking at rules of the Senate. 1-3 suspension of rules requires 2/3. It does not make any reference to debate. I can't find any other reference. So that turning then to Mason's, what motions are not debatable? This is Mason's section 82, subparagraph 2, section G. The following motions are not debatable, suspension of the rules. I'm just quoting Mason's. Look, it's got a Post-it note on it. That's got to be right.
Mr. President. Privilege of the floor. I think it's a little bit of your prerogative. That motion hasn't been made and we can have a conversation via privilege of the floor, and I'm happy to have that. I in no way intend to sandbag anybody. So for my belief, if you're willing, I'm happy to have a conversation via privilege of the floor on this issue, and I think it's in order to do so. The motion has not been made. I really do think there's a lot of issues here that we need to actually have fleshed out a little bit to understand whether we're doing it. I still, from my end, and I'll make my argument again, it makes sense for our body to go home and be able to do things if we can do the business in a correct fashion. And back to adjourning, it's been made pretty clear to me, and I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong, is one body can adjourn up to 3 days and go out and do it in the House. In fact, the other side visited with me about that very thing on these bills, about us taking 3 days, doing ours, adjourning, they'd do theirs, and we'd come back together at the end. So we have talked about that. I don't believe they have any heartburn if we're gone for a day. That's as long as the business gets done, and we'll be ready Monday morning to take their bills out.
Mr. Floor Leader, we do have some additional information, but we will, Senator Landon, would you like to have privilege of the floor?
Mr. President, may I have privilege
Please
of
do.
the floor? Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that part of the concern, the reason that we're holding and trying to find out for certain is that this money situation comes into whether or not senators and representatives have to check out of hotel rooms and then check back in on Monday. So that's really at play. I think, I suspect that when we're in session, it simply is going to cost us to conduct a session. I mean, I'm not sure that this motion is going to involve money as much as it is an opportunity to do the people's work and then get home and straighten up the house and straighten up our lives back home so that we can get back down here on Monday and resume our duties. So that clarification, I think, might help the public to understand what's at play here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All part of the discussion. Give me just a moment, please. Okay, thank you for your patience. This offers some additional information, and I do thank the body for their discussion and input on this, but Mr. Floor Leader, before you make your motion, we've had some of this clarified. So on Friday and Saturday, yes, the legislature will be paid regardless of whether you're here or not. You will be paid Friday and Saturday regardless of whether you are paid, whether you are here or not. Session staff, they are paid as needed. And this is how it works. They are paid for 1 day of every session day, regardless of the hours they work. For example, if they come in and work 2 hours, fine. But if we take them all the way out to those 14 and 16-hour days like we traditionally do, still the same regardless. So once again, Friday and Saturday, legislature's paid regardless of if you were here or not. Session staff paid as needed. So with that, Mr. Floor Leader, what is your desire? Vice President Hicks,
Mr. Chairman, privilege of the floor, please.
please do.
You know, given where we're at, the discussions we're at, personally, I would like the opportunity of another day to go back and visit with my constituents back home. I don't live here in Cheyenne. I travel back and forth through my district. The opportunity for me to go back and say, here's where we are, here's the bills that are still alive, I think affords me a better opportunity to go back and have a discussion with my constituents. So when we come back down in here, I want to doing crossovers and then conference committees, I have a better feeling for where my constituents at. And irregardless of pay or anything else, I would like that opportunity. Anyway, just a thought for people to consider, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further privileges of the floor? We will go back to the floor leader. What's your desire?
Mr. President, in accordance with Senate Rule 1-3, I move that the Senate suspend Rules 7-1, 7-3, and 7-8 to allow acceleration of Senate File 1003 and Senate File 1019 from second to third reading today.
Mr. Floor Leader, would you insert the names, titles of those bills?
Senate File 1003, COVID-19 Discriminatory Practices Prohibition. Senate File 1019, Wyoming Gaming Commission, Scrivener Error Correction.
And for clarification, 1003, 1019. You have heard the motion pursuant to SR 13. Suspension of the Senate rules requires a 2/3 vote of the members duly elected. This motion is not debatable. Would the chief clerk please call the roll?
Roll call on the suspension of the rules motion. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? No. Beitman? No. Boner?
Aye.
Aye. Bouchard? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. James? No. Kinsky? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas excused. Perkins?
No.
No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? No. President Dockstader? No. Closing vote? Landon? Aye to no. Cooper? Aye to no. Cole? Aye to no. Murphy? Aye to no. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. For the suspension, 8 aye, 21 no, 1 excused.
By your vote of 8 to 21, Senate Rules 7-1, 7-3, and 7-8 are not suspended for consideration of Senate File 1003 and Senate File 1019 on the third reading today. Those Senate files will be considered on third reading tomorrow, October 29th, 2021. Mr. Floor Leader, your direction.
Mr. President, I move we stand adjourned until 8 o'clock or till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Announcements. Announcements. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. On following the note of the senator from Trona County, Committee 10, Labor and Health, we had a meeting scheduled for the 11th and 12th of November. We've changed that. It will now be just the 12th and not the 11th, trying to save LSO some time and work.
Would you repeat that for those listening out across the state?
You bet. To the wider audience, Labor Committee number 10, instead of our scheduled meeting for the 11th and 12th, that meeting has been changed to be only the 12th, which is a Friday here in Cheyenne.
Thank you.
I believe in room 6.
Thank you. Further announcements? Further announcements. You've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion has passed.